Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. I'm Trevor and this is Adam. And today we are doing our season picks for the upcoming BYU football season 2024. And before we do, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can catch our other content as we break down our most hyped games on BYU's football schedule, as well as the games we're most excited to catch across the Big 12, as well as all of our other BYU and Big 12 content. All right, so Adam, we've got a big season up ahead. BYU has a loaded schedule. How you feeling about it, just in general terms?
I, as a fan, I'm not feeling great. We drew the tough card of the Big 12. We got some tough teams, and I know it's just preseason rankings. Some teams at the bottom are going to be towards the top, and vice versa. But anyway, you cut it. It's a tough schedule. It really is. BYU needs a bounce back year. They need to overperform this year, and it doesn't look great. I know later on we'll go through kind of an in-depth analysis of the football team, but I worry a lot about the quarterback position. I worry a lot about whether our offensive line can turn it around, whether our defense can really put pressure on a quarterback. And if they can't make improvement in those things, then this schedule is going to eat them up because we've got some great teams coming up on the schedule. But on the flip side, I think the team loves the challenge. This is why you want to be in the Big 12 is for this schedule right here.
So we expect and anticipate our schedule to be possibly even tougher than last year. Is that how you're feeling?
I think it is in some aspects. There's definitely some teams on there. You lose Texas and Oklahoma, who were great teams last year. BYU hung tough in one of those games, not in the other. But I think overall, if you look at the caliber of teams across the board that you're going to play in the Big 12, I think it's a step up. Um, and BYU didn't have big splashes in the transfer portal. Instead, they went with sort of a novel approach of we're going to recruit our own players, and they did that to a pretty impressive rate. Is that enough to bring a heightened level of play to this schedule? You're saying no, we believe in our guys. I know they didn't go bowling last year. We didn't get it done at the end. I believe in this group, is what the coaches are saying, and they're going to ride with the team they got. And it, continuity matters. Is that enough to overcome the big names on the schedule that you get week after week after week?
Yeah, all great points. I mean, BYU, I think, will be coming back with a chip on their shoulder and ready to compete. But even if the team is better, which we assume they are, they're also going to, potentially be playing an even tougher schedule. And so, with that ahead of them, they definitely have their work cut out for them. And our out of conference schedule does not do us any favor, which brings us to. So here is our schedule for this upcoming season. And I'm sure everyone watching this has already looked at this and is well aware. But the way it breaks down, I mean, the bye weeks aren't terrible. It's great after that tough stretch there in the middle and going all the way to Florida that you get a recovery week before going into play your rival. But that, unfortunately, that tough stretch there in the middle is at least just a 3-game stretch, with bye weeks on either side of that. But yeah, the schedule by and large does not really set up favorably because and they actually talked about this on BYUSN, and it was something that I had thought about before, is we have our tough games pretty much at home. You look at Arizona, Oklahoma State, going to UCF is a large part of what makes that one tough. So not that one, and then Utah is at Utah. But then so Kansas, Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Kansas State are all coming to Lavelle Edwards Stadium. And for me, I'm kind of thinking I'd rather have. I mean, yes, for fans attending, that is a fantastic slate. But in terms of winning the game, you kind of want those games that are more winnable at home because that's where the crowd can influence it. Whereas you think Baylor, you're like, okay, that should be a good matchup. We should be able to compete in that one and hopefully win. But it's at Baylor. Same with Arizona State. Will that make the difference in what should be an otherwise fairly competitive game? Whereas you feel like at LES, you have an advantage over those teams.
I totally agree. In that way, the schedule doesn't play to our favor. Maybe it allows you to pick off one of those really tough teams where if you played at Kansas or at Oklahoma State, you'd get trounced. You got them at home with the crowd noise, you pull an upset on one of those. But I agree. At this point in our program, where we're at and we're rebuilding and hoping to get to the point where we're going bowling. We're not vying for a Big 12 title at this point. This is not the schedule you want. If you're in the top third of the conference, this is the schedule you want. You want those tough games at home, and you feel like you can handle those uh, opponents who are projected to be a little bit less difficult on the road. And so that for where we're at in our program build, this is a really tough schedule.
I'm no conspiracy theorist. Oh, okay, maybe I am, but it does feel like they set up the schedule to advantage some of the better teams in the conference, and I think they realize we have to have teams that kind of run the gamut that do really well in order to be in better position going into the playoff. Versus having the round robin where there's nobody really stands out, and so it does feel like you look at Utah, Arizona, schools that avoid a lot of the other tough teams. Whereas BYU, maybe they'd already written us off, or what, I don't know. And maybe it was none of those things. Maybe that's just the way it shook out. But it is tough. And then our out of conference schedule doesn't do us any favors either, playing two very quality teams. SMU is now technically a Power Five, but even last year, really, they won the AAC last year, right? Pretty sure.
Right at the top.
And
They were very, very good.
yeah, I'm pretty sure they won. And Wyoming, a solid team. We saw what they did to Texas Tech. They hung in there with Texas. And now we're playing at both those places. So quite a handful of a schedule. So let's go ahead and do our wins and losses. Let's do our predictions here. So first game of the season, Southern Illinois, the Salukis, your favorite mascot. How do you
That's right.
feel? How do you feel like BYU is going to do in this one?
They'll pull the W. I'll be watching how they win closer than if they win. Um, a loss in week one is disastrous. I mean, that'll just resonate across multiple weeks, and I don't see that happening. I see a W for BYU. The question is, do you come out and you look great and you win by 40 points, or do you come out and you struggle and you win by a touchdown, maybe two?
Well said. Yeah, if we come out with another year where we struggle off the bat, it's going to be rough because it's not going to get any easier in the next couple games. Not like this last year where we had a couple warm up games to start the season. You get thrown right into the thick of it, playing a quality team at SMU. So,
Yep.
and how do you think we're going to do against the Mustangs?
I've got us with a loss there. You mentioned how well they played last year. They're building on a lot of that success. They're coming into the ACC. I don't see them making a ton of noise in the ACC as far as running for the title, something like that. But I do think they're going to be a strong middle of the pack ACC team. Um, and early in the season, when we're trying to figure out our quarterback situation, we're trying to make sure that offensive line is polished off. I think the story coming out of there is questions about can we get to the quarterback? Do we have the same issues of last year? I think there's going to be a lot of questions coming out of this game. It's on the road early on. I don't love it. I don't think it's good for our program to be in a situation like this, but the schedule's the schedule, and I think we lose that one.
Yeah, I kind of felt like we would get one win out of these two. Say they're both close to 50-50, even if we're favored, that should, come out to us winning one and losing one. I went with a win at SMU just because I felt like, I don't know why, it's not based on a whole lot. Just I felt like it might be a little easier versus going to Wyoming. And so, and that would be our loss of out of those two games.
Yeah, I struggle with the same calculation. I've got a W at Wyoming, but I can almost hear my dad's voice laughing at me in the back of my head as he has many, many times warned me about the um, playing in Laramie and the disasters that have happened there over the years. He remembers well the whack years and the number of um, potential highlight seasons that Wyoming has derailed, and maybe they've got our number again. It's never an easy place to play. It's always cold and windy, even in August and September. So We'll see how we fare. I've got us in as a W, but it feels like a jinx I put on us there.
Well, hopefully mine counter jinx it because yeah, it does feel like either way there's a good chance we only pick up one. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we came away losing both of those. I'd be very disappointed, and our shot at a bowl game is essentially evaporated at that point. The rest of the season is kind of you know, just to see how we do with the rest of it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I do. I mean, I hope and I would expect that BYU comes away with at least one win, if not two, between these. But it does seem like a big ask right now with, until we see the team in action. I think that's
yeah.
a reasonable expectation.
Well, and I agree. If you lose those two, look out. It really has the potential to derail your season. You got to win one of those two.
Oh yeah, for sure. Preferably both. Starting the season 3-1 or 3-0 would be ideal, obviously, but that would mean you get the rest of the conference play, and you just have to pick up three more, and then you go bowling. Which, while still not, that's still kind of a low expectation. At least you make it to a bowl game and take some of the pressure off the team and shows progression.
Yeah.
All right, so. Now we got K-State coming to town. How are we feeling about this one?
Yeah, I'm picking a loss here. I think K-State's going to vie for the Big 12 title. I don't know that they're quite as good. I'm not as sold on their quarterback, Avery Johnson. I think he's really athletic. Is he sort of that early career Taysom Hill ilk where he's a great runner, passing game is still developing? So I think there's a shot in that game. I don't think it's that they're just going to run over us, but that's a good team year over year. They're just very, very impressive, and I think they come and they get a victory in Will Edwards Stadium.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one, and it's unfortunate that we get them in town on a year when they're doing really well. I guess one advantage is they have, they'll be playing at Tulane, and Tulane's been pretty good, although they also have a coaching change. And then they get Arizona at home, and then they come to Provo. They could be caught, playing Arizona and then looking ahead to Oklahoma State, come to BYU. Maybe it's a night game. Maybe things fall just right. But I feel like all that is wishful thinking. I think it will be a tough one. Although I'd love to see BYU come out and compete. I could see it being one of those games where we do really well, maybe through three quarters, and then Kansas State pulls away, and in a pretty convincing fashion. But who knows?
Yeah,
All right, so I kind of have this broken down into four segments. I have our mentally just kind of our out of conference, the next two, and then the between the two bye games, and then that last 4 game stretch. And so out of this, I thought, okay, we got to have two, and then out of these two, I thought, we've got to have one. I think going to Baylor is a very reasonable expectation that BYU can go in and win. They have a new offensive scheme. I know there's a lot of pressure on the coaching staff over there, and the Barrington brothers. But I think BYU. I think it should be a fun game. It's been a fun rivalry so far. Out of the 4 games, I believe just 4 games between the two programs. The home team has won all of them. So that doesn't bode well, but that's in the past. I think BYU can go in there and beat a team that's really struggling right now.
yeah. I'll be interested to see if they bounce back. I hope so. I like Dave Aranda. I like his style. I think he can be a great coach, but I think he's really strong on the defensive side of the ball, and they're going to need some offense, and I don't know that they have the weapons to do that. And so I like the matchup. BYU going against a weaker Baylor offense, hopefully having enough of a run game at that point to eke out a victory. I think BYU wins 17-14, 21-17 type game. I don't think it's high scoring, but I think they come away with just enough to win at Baylor in this rivalry, and BYU really needs this game.
They have to, especially if they lose one of those out of conference games. So it's going to be a lot will be riding on that game. So fortunately, there's a bye week after, so BYU can leave it all out on the field. So after that, we go to Arizona, another team that's projected to finished near the top of the conference, coming in from after having a great season in the final season of the Pac-12. Well, what we expect will be the last season of the Pac-12 as we knew it, right? So maybe they somehow resurrect it with they rebuild it. But how do you see that game going for BYU?
Yeah, I think Arizona's going to take a step back. I've mentioned this before, but it's really unfortunate they lost their head coach. That was a fun team to watch, really bright future. I'm sad he jumped ship over to Washington because it just felt like he had something great going, and I would have loved to see that continue with Arizona. So I think they take a major step back. However, they're still going to be a good team. They've got, Noah Fafita has been a great QB. He'll continue in that role. They have enough firepower. I think Arizona wins this game against us at LaBelle Edwards.
Yeah, I was just looking to refresh myself, and the something that could be, I look a lot at schedules because when teams play each other and how those games fall can be meaningful. They play 2 weeks prior. They play at Utah, then they have Texas Tech in Arizona, and then they go to BYU, following which is Colorado. Now, who knows what Colorado will be? I assume that they're gonna kind of do what they did last year, start out hot and then flounder a little bit. But those other games might have their eye a little bit more than BYU. It's possible. Obviously, the night game may not have the same impact. The altitude may not have the same impact, but nonetheless, those things are worth keeping in mind. I um, I am going to put a win here, but this is more wishful thinking. Again, um, I have it broken down into segments, and I really want to see BYU be able to at least get one win out of these 3 games. And if you look at the odds, if each of the games are, somewhere between 20 and 40% chance that BYU can win. I don't know if BYU will even have that high. I'd hope so at home with a couple of these games. Then they should theoretically be able to pick up one win there, statistically speaking. So, and that I feel like Arizona might be the BYU's best chance coming off a bye week, maybe having a little momentum after picking off a win at Baylor, maybe Arizona, just where it falls in the schedule. I don't know, maybe wishful thinking, but I think it can happen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with this whole section. Um, I feel like these are all games where we will probably be the underdog, but for various reasons have a puncher's chance in there to pull an upset. Um, it's I like that potential in each of those 3 games, although my picks may not demonstrate that optimism.
So for Oklahoma State, I think I made that clear. I picked one win out of this section, so I actually have a loss here against the Cowboys. I think they just bring in too much, and I think after having Arizona the week before and then having the Cowboys come to town, I just think BYU hopefully shows up and has another good showing against the Cowboys, and hopefully could just finish out a game this time. But I think they get the win there.
Yeah,
They
I
Oklahoma State.
yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I've got Oklahoma State winning this one. Um, too much firepower. I like Oklahoma State more than others to repeat in the title game. Um, Mike Gundy, he's a man, and you
He's
just
40.
he you don't pick against him.
No, yeah, I watching what they did last year, even as weird as their season was, what he was able to get out of his team, I think was very impressive. And I was just looking, and yeah, they are coming off a bye week prior to this game, so they are coming to Provo, but um, they have that
Coming
bye week.
fresh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll see. UCF, this team, it's the team that a lot of people are saying could be kind of a sleeper, come in, compete. A lot of people high on what they're doing on the recruiting and Malzahn and his experience. So what do you see happening there in
Yeah,
Orlando?
I've got us with a loss at UCF. Um, it's I picked on a prior video when we were ranking these games as this being the most meaningless game on our schedule. because I feel like it's the bye week before the rivalry game, middle of the season. I see us in the mid in a midseason slump with those three losses right in a row, and I feel like that's another game where we travel East Coast and we just look hapless on the field. Um, just one of those frustrating games where we feel like we could compete. UCF doesn't play their best game, but we're just not putting it together. And you get a lot of rumblings at this point with BYU at 3-5.
Yeah, we could. I mean, if you think of last year, because BYU has a chance to stay. Let's say they start 4-1. I mean, weren't we 4-1 last year? I know we were like 5-2 at
Oh
one
yeah,
point.
yeah,
So
4-1, 5-2.
yeah, so we could hit another slump like that where, 5-2 early on, 4-1. We were doing pretty well. It felt like all of a sudden, hey, we should at least make a bowl game, and it would just went in that spiral. And that's what I'm really worried about this chunk of the season doing to us. And then, uh, as you mentioned, we've got that bye week leading into rivalry week. I don't want to say it, so why don't you? How do you see this?
Well, as I narrate the season here, and we're in the doldrums of a 3-5 schedule, and frustration, looking hapless at UCF. We get the bye week. We go at Utah and play at another level. You just the rivalry games. You never know what's going to happen. Utah is an excellent team this year. Um, just really well prepared at each spot, but funky things happen in rivalry games. And I've got BYU with the W here. Um, and that pivot point in the season to say, no, we're not dead. We're not spiraling like last year. We learned some lessons from last year, um, and we're going to start to pull up the plane that's dive bombing right now. This is our beginning.
Oh, I wish I had your optimism. I'm just afraid of jinxing us. So I love it. I do think this game could potentially be much more competitive than you would expect on paper. It could be one of those where it comes down to the final drive or something. But yeah, I think and BYU's had more improbable wins against Utah in the past, but I do think this one will be tough, especially coming off of a tough stretch of through that season. So um, I don't expect BYU to win, but I don't like saying that either because it means the inverse of that is also true. So those other guys get a W. So
Yep.
um, all right, and I expect the losses to continue to mount up with Kansas coming to town. I think this one, with their ability to score, a lot of it is. I do expect improved defense from BYU this year, but unless our offense can stay on the field, I think the Jayhawks will just wear us down, and and that's what I'm worried about there, especially coming up. And really, regardless of what happens, I feel like coming off of rivalry week, and no matter what, either you've won this game and you might just be running on that high and not as focused, or you lose and you might be down coming off a long stretch, coming up with a frustrating loss to your rival, and then getting a very quality team at home. So no matter what, I just see it as really kind of this trap game for BYU.
Yeah, I think it is coming off the rivalry game. Um, so much emotion in that. It's going to be a letdown, and uh, especially if Jalen Daniels is healthy, so tough to beat. He's so
I guess it's a
talented.
big if.
It is a big if. It's been a big if every year. That if he can finish a season, he's going to be in the Heisman conversation. He's so
Yeah.
talented. But backs are tricky, and that's where it always gets him. And so even if he's not healthy, I feel like Grimes can put together a really effective offense. And I've got us with a loss in this one too.
Yeah, frustrating. Okay. Now we get to one of my favorite stretches of the season.
Yes, the
Hopefully.
last two games.
Yes.
BYU is going to boil it down to the last two games. If there's any shot at bowl eligibility, I think it will be with BYU sitting on 4 wins and 6 losses at this point in the season. I do. Obviously, if you're 3-7, you're not going to make it. You're bowl ineligible already. I feel like BYU will find a way to 4 wins at this point in the season. I really do. Um, if you drop a couple of those non-conference games, then maybe not. But there's enough there that BYU can scrap together and at least put the season on the line here in these last two games. I don't know if they're going to do it, but I like their odds. I've got them with a win against Arizona State. I'm going to submit a petition for Tyler Algier to be able to play any play that involves a fumble return. He has to be allowed on the field.
That was one of the all-time plays ever, and really helped BYU seal that win. Last year when I hate even talking about it, but that goal line play that was intercepted and run back, Retzhoff was trying to pull a Tyler Algier, man. He'd watched the footage and he made a good effort for it. So I started getting excited for a split second when I watched that and realized it wasn't happening. But all-time play. So yeah, I'm with you. I think BYU fans show out. I think Arizona State at this point, their season is a disaster, and hopefully, it comes home away from home. BYU shows up and probably still more competitive. I don't think they'll, I think it'll be a good game, but I think BYU wins this one, which gets them to the last game of the season. The whole season on the line, going up against the other Cougars. And I think BYU, they have to win this one. Obviously, to go become bowl eligible, but when you're playing these other teams, Baylor, Arizona State, Houston, all projected there at the bottom of the conference with BYU, you got to at least win those games, and especially with all those tough ones on the schedule, and then you get those easy ones. You have to take advantage of it. It's at home. You got to end the season strong, even if at this point you're only at 4 wins, it's only going to be a 5th win. You're still going to be bowl ineligible. You've just got to win this one and end the season strong.
I totally agree. I've got them with the W. They are a beatable team on paper right now, and who knows? Houston could be fighting for the Big 12 title game at this point. You just never know. That's why I love college football. But it looks like a Houston team that we can handle at home to get into bowl eligibility. High pressure game. You'd love to see a big turnout at Cougar Stadium end of the season with a bowl berth on the line and a W for the Cougs, the real Cougs.
Yeah, exactly. Although, I mean, people are down on Houston, but also getting Willie Fritz. I mean, I don't know what kind of turnaround he can do in 1 year, but what he was able to do at Tulane was super impressive. And so now you think of, getting to another university with more resources and, just all that built around him. And even, in the state of Texas, you would expect that at some point he'll get that team going again. But our hope is that he can't do it all in one season. And by the end of the season, through injuries or whatever, just through wear and tear and everything, that hopefully that BYU is playing playing better at that point, especially at home. So, all right. So both of us have BYU going 6-6, getting to a bowl game. I actually, again, when you break it down into these sections, again, I think you probably have roughly, this should be very high percentage. These are about 50-50. So that's about 2 wins. This should be very low. This should be a bit higher. Again, roughly 1 win here. But hopefully 1 win through this stretch. Although I'm with you. I think it's very likely they don't win any of those. In fact, I could see a very long losing streak here going to 5. And I just think that really I have 6 wins here, but I'm not willing to, I wouldn't put money on it. I'm still feeling like this may be another 5-win season. Each year they keep saying, look, they get our hopes up. They talk about all the things, how this year's different, how we've improved this and that. And then I say, I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to fall for it. And just like Charlie Brown, every time, we get a couple weeks out from the season, all of a sudden I get hyped. It's all I can think about. And what happens, it's a bit of a letdown. And so I'm trying not to let myself get too hyped this year. I'm really in my heart of hearts. I think this probably is another loss, and BYU only gets 5 wins. But I really felt like, BYU has a chance to pick off at least one of those upper echelon teams this year. And so I do think there's a real chance for that. And so I had to put in there. I want to be optimistic for this, but I don't know. I'm not completely sold yet.
Yeah, I would agree. It almost feels like 5-7 is more probable than 6-6. Um, I was listening to a podcast with Hans Olsen, and I love Hans Olsen. Uh, he's so straightforward and as unbiased as a color commentator can be. Um, for someone who's an alumni of the program, former player, all that, he just comes so straightforward. And he basically said, that he doesn't see BYU necessarily as going to be any better in any category. But when he spends time with the team and the coaching staff, they just act like they have something up their sleeve that no one else knows. And that's how you'd have to act if you're going to win. And if you're a football team, half the time that's true, half the time that's not. And so there's elements of the program, like I said, they focused on retaining their own players instead of going out to the transfer portal and recruiting new people to come in to replace people they knew were going to leave. That was a different approach. I liked that, and I'm more impressed that they stay. The wide receiver core. Right? I look at that and I'm thinking, who's going to throw you the ball? Gary Bohannon and Jake Retzlaff do not look like they have polished arms, but none of those wide receivers hit the portal. They all stuck around. You got tight end U with signee after signee. We just signed a 4-star wide receiver. I'm looking at it, I'm saying, where's the quarterback? Who in the
Right.
world this year and the next 3 years is it going to be Mr. 5'10" Hillstead that's looks like a buck 70 soaking wet? Is that who's going to throw him the ball? I could go on and on about the program, and we will at later dates, but the program feels like they have something, and I can't wait to see it. I hope it's what they think it is. And B, on the inside, that team is sticking together. Really good, talented people that could go elsewhere for big time NAL money and a lot of glory are sticking around the program. And for me as a fan, when I'm looking at this and thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to be better? That's what gives me hope, is to say, well, you know what? People who know a whole lot more about this than I do are hanging their hat, hanging their careers on that program and sticking around.
Yeah, no, it's true. And you look at guys that had NFL aspirations, could have left last year. Water, granted, he was coming off an injury, but Tyler Batty. So on the defensive side too, there's guys that are coming back, and so I do have a lot of faith in Jay Hill and what he's putting together. Does he have the pieces yet? I don't know, but I guess what we can really hope for is, like you were talking about, the continuity. We saw it. It worked with basketball last year. Could it work with football this year? I think we've improved on the coaching staff. I mean, really, you look at where we were last season with a lot of these games where it felt like there were some turning points, that, BYU just couldn't quite get, the run game together, couldn't quite stay on the field, that you feel like perhaps just that, you know, just taking it, just marginally improving through the coaching, through the scheme, through the preparedness of the team, through more continuity, that there is that chance that, they come out and they're a little bit sharper and they're able to pull it together and get some wins where we had losses last year. Because imagine if we would have had any kind of running game last year, how much different it could have been.
Oh yeah.
Granted, there were games where we just got completely boat raced, absolutely. But there were other games that we were in, that I feel like, at least till the end, the scores may not reflect it. But I went back recently and rewatched the highlights of a lot of these games, especially ones I've tried to block from my memory. And I really feel like there were other games. I mean, Texas, granted, they did it a lot, but BYU is in that game more than the final score indicated until later. But Texas did that with a lot of their opponents. But Oklahoma State and Oklahoma at the end of the year, where we were finally able to run a little bit, we were in those games. So, yeah, like you said, there could be something. Their confidence is growing. I just hope that it's, whatever they're doing behind the scenes, that it's actually resulting in going to result in performance and not just confidence. Because we've talked up in the off season every year, so now I'm waiting for that to really translate into action on the field.
Well, and that's why this season's so crucial. If you can't take that step forward, I think the confidence then begins to look like a facade, and then you start to lose people. Um, if it's backed up by some progress, a 6-6, 7-5 campaign is all it takes to say, yeah, we're improving. This is the core group of guys. We can do this, and the total future of the program, meaning the next 2 to 3 years, really changes if you can come out and deliver on that this year. But if not, then it just feels like a lot of peacocking, and everybody kind of calls you bluff. And yeah, you're confident, that's great, but if you're not backing it up, then I feel like that starts to break down. Guys start to transfer.
Yeah, well, also then you start, maybe not a coaching change just yet, but that seat all of a sudden gets very, very
It gets
warm.
pretty warm quick, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll get into all that in future videos. So this is kind of our expectation. Let us know in the comments how you see where you think BYU's final season record is going to be. Do you think they make a bowl game or not? And which games do you kind of disagree with us on here? Do you see as potential wins or maybe losses that we didn't? Let us know all that in the comments, and be sure to like this video and subscribe so you can catch all of our other breakdowns as we start getting ready for this upcoming football season. And we will check you next time. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.